I've been in Parliament for 15 years in the Netherlands, but he is really senior. He's also member of the all-party parliamentarian group on freedom of religion and belief. So he's a very important person from the UK, from the House, to chair also this meeting, or to kick off this meeting and do the introduction. So I'll give the floor to Lord Alton.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing the people who are here on the panel today to address this issue, free to believe or not, end criminalisation of apostasy and blasphemy. My own interest in this goes right back to the foundation of the Jubilee campaign, and Jubilee is one of the co-hosts and organisers of today's event. I was a co-founder primarily because of things that were happening to Jewish people and Christian people in the former Soviet Union. But as Jubilee developed, and it has spawned an even bigger and better, as often things are, counterpart in the United States, we could see that this was a much broader, wider issue, and Article 18 of the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that we all have a right to believe or not to believe, or to change our belief. And this cut right to the quick when it came to looking at some of the blasphemy cases that we're going to discuss during the meeting today. Back in 2019, I went to Pakistan, a country I've been interested in a long time. I was a Liverpool member of the House of Commons, and it's wonderful that we have a large Pakistan diaspora in the UK. Many live in the north of England, and through the chairman of my own then constituency association, who was also the trustee of the local mosque and who'd been born and brought up in Lahore, I was able to gather a lot about some of the problems which were facing groups, for instance, of Sufi Muslims. I learned a lot about what was happening to the Ahmadis, and in fact my next engagement today will be to chair a meeting for the British Ahmadis to discuss their situation in Pakistan. But I also learnt about people like Salman Taseer, the very brave governor of the Punjab, who with his friend Shahbaz Bhatti stood for the reform of blasphemy laws because of the way that they had been used vexatiously against often Christians, but not exclusively so, sometimes against other Muslims, sometimes Hindus, and sometimes Ahmadis. And they could be used to whip up a frenzy, to whip up a case, often with no real grounds. I've also been involved in Nigeria and a number of other countries because of the work of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Freedom of Religion or Belief. And only this afternoon, I've come straight from the chamber with my colleague Baroness Cox. We raised the situation in Nigeria. I was referencing the case of Leah Sharibu, a young girl who was abducted. She was raped, impregnated, and told that she had to convert. She's still held in captivity. I've met her mother, Rebecca. But the case was also raised of Mubarak Bala, who, as you know, has been given a 24-year prison sentence in Nigeria for so-called blasphemy. So in welcoming all of you here today to the IPU room, I mean, we are literally next to the Westminster Hall, the Great Hall, where the first meeting of Parliament took place in 1265, but it's also where some of our rather atrocious acts against fellow believers have been staged. It was where Thomas More, who was a member of the House of Commons and the House of Lords, he was Speaker of the House of Commons, but where he was tried because he refused to conform to an edict, which was primarily about religious beliefs and values. It was also where men like Edmund Campion stood trial, and he was then hung, drawn and quartered. So whether you call it blasphemy or whether you call it heresy or whatever word you want to attach to it, when we fail to live alongside with one another in diversity and in respect, learning about coexistence, we know from our own history what horrors this can lead to, what we can do to one another. So you're all welcome. This has been, as I said, brought together by Jubilee Campaign, but with collaborative work by Set My People Free and Humanist UK. Throughout many years, I've strived to highlight the multiple religious freedom violations taking place across the world, notably in Hong Kong, in Xinjiang. Last night I did an interview with Nuri Takel at the campus of Notre Dame University just off Trafalgar Square with the launch of his book, No Escape. He was born in one of the concentration camps in Xinjiang. 1 million people are incarcerated there. Yesterday in the House, I raised the plight of people living in Tigray. I put the post up on my website last night, the answer I received from Lord Ahmed, 6 million people held in siege conditions, where yes, religion may not be the primary factor, but it is certainly a contributory factor in what is happening there. North Korea, where I've travelled 4 times, where the United Nations Commission on Human Rights said that there are crimes against humanity, their phrase, being committed. They said it ought to be referred to the International Criminal Court. It never has been, because China, of course, threatens to use a veto in the Security Council, stopping a reference. I've just mentioned Nigeria, but Myanmar, Burma, I travelled illegally into Burma, into the Karen state, and I was there 3 years ago and visited some of the places where Rohingya live, and I saw the appalling things that were being done to them by the military, but often on the grounds of religion. So today's event will focus on the nations which impose harsh legal and extra-legal punishment upon individuals accused of offending a faith or leaving the majority religion of their nations. The UN Secretary-General, in his annual report on the question of the death penalty, and I speak as someone who, man and boy, has always opposed the death penalty, made clear that the death penalty, I quote, must never be imposed as a sanction for specific forms of non-violent conduct, such as apostasy, blasphemy, adultery, and consensual same-sex relations. Now, despite this, at least 12 nations continue to maintain the death penalty for apostasy and blasphemy, and these countries include Afghanistan, where we've seen the re-emergence of some of the excesses of the Taliban, particularly directed at women, but also minorities like the Hazara, Brunei, Iran, the Maldives, Mauritania, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, United Arab Emirates, Yemen, about which we'll hear more from John, and some northern states of Nigeria. In Afghanistan, following the Taliban's takeover in August 2021, Christians have reported receiving menacing phone calls threatening revenge for their faith. In Pakistan, tens of Christian converts and Ahmadi Muslim minorities are currently on death row for alleged blasphemy. And in one recent and extremely horrific case, 22-year-old Christian University student Deborah Samuel Yakubu was stoned to death and subsequently set on fire by her male classmates after she'd criticised her school class WhatsApp group for their focus on religious-related content, and had stated that Jesus was the reason she was able to pass her exams. In the weeks following this senseless killing, already 2 other young Nigerian women have been threatened with death for their public condemnation of Deborah's murder. And of course, we've observed some remarkable progress in recent years towards the repeal of criminalisation of blasphemy and apostasy. In 2020, for instance, Sudan's civilian-led transitional government ratified the Miscellaneous Amendments Act, which repealed the crime of apostasy. But I might tell you that as recently as last week, I stood on a platform alongside Maryam Ibrahim. Some of you will remember she was the young woman in Sudan who was chained to the floor and forced to give birth at 8 months gestation, having been sentenced to death for apostasy and previously sentenced to 100 lashes for blasphemy. So these are not entirely past events, and sadly in Sudan, with the re-emergence again of a military dictatorship, we all know what Omar al-Bashir did previously in places like Darfur. Unfortunately, it's happening all over again. So we've got to do more to bring about a global end to the use of capital punishment for perceived religious offences. Jubilee Campaign and Set My People Free recommend the insertion of Forbes-specific language into 2 United Nations General Assembly resolutions that are up for a vote against, again, this coming November. The resolution on extrajudicial, summary or arbitrary executions, and the resolution for a moratorium on the death penalty. And more specifically, I might add, they recommend that these resolutions address, and I quote, that the death penalty can never be imposed as a sanction for non-violent conduct, such as apostasy and blasphemy. So thank you, all of you, for being here today, for your attendance. We hope you'll join in the growing calls for freedom to believe and an end to the criminalisation of apostasy and blasphemy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Dalton, for this introduction and giving a broader overview of what's happening on freedom of religion worldwide, and especially your warm interest and your involvement in this fight for freedom of religion and belief. So that's really encouraging to hear, and also your personal stories. We go quickly to Ms. Chiara Porro, who has to leave after her speech, but that doesn't mean that she is not involved. On the contrary, Australia is very much involved, and we're happy that they're even a front runner for this plea that they did last year in 2021 in the Human Rights Council. She probably is going to explain, so I'm not taking her words from her mouth, but please welcome Cheryl Porro as Ambassador of Australia for the Holy See.
Thank you, Joel, and thank you also to Lord Alton for those initial comments. So my name's Chiara, and I'm Australia's ambassador to the Holy See, but I'm also Australia's representative on the International Religious Freedom of Belief Alliance, and I've been quite actively involved in religion and foreign policy issues over the 2 years that I've been in this role. I'd like to thank the Jubilee Campaign and the other partners as well for organising this event. And I apologise in advance for having to leave for another commitment. I'd particularly like to thank also the other speakers that will speak today, who will share their experiences of persecution based on freedom of religion or belief. I think their courage in sharing their stories to affect change is really crucial to amplify victim survivors' voices in this conversation and reflect on lived experiences of those persecuted for their religious beliefs, including to better understand the impact of our policy, being a government representative, of our policy discussions and the implementation of our policies. Australia firmly opposes the death penalty in all circumstances for all people. We support and advocate strongly for the universal abolition of the death penalty, and we urge all countries that carry out capital punishment to cease executions and establish a moratorium on the use of the death penalty. At the very least, we call for countries to reduce the scope or incidence of the application of the death penalty, and we strongly oppose the use of blasphemy and apostasy laws to discriminate against religious belief or practice, and the application of the death penalty to these crimes. This is very much in line with Australia's principled support for freedom of religion or belief for all. Last year, and I'd recommend to those of you who are not familiar with it, we funded and launched the Killing in the Name of God report on religious offences and the death penalty, which was discussed at the UN General Assembly and also in other forums. This year, I was pleased to speak at the Jubilee Campaign side event at the 49th session of the Human Rights Council as well on protecting life, repealing the death penalty for apostasy and blasphemy. But I wanted to speak a little bit today, and Lord Alton mentioned this before, about the plan for this year. We're going to build on some of the work we've done already, including by co-leading for the first time, and this is with Costa Rica, the negotiations on the biennial resolution on a moratorium on the death penalty. And I wanted to give a little bit of background to this resolution. It obviously calls for states to establish a moratorium on the death penalty, on execution. It's a resolution that was first adopted in 2007 and it has subsequently been adopted every 2 years since 2008. The last time it was passed was in 2020. And there's been a growing number of countries voting in support of the resolution each year. So in 2020, there was 147 countries that voted yes or abstained. And there was only 38 that voted no only. That's still quite a number. The resolution is supported and progressed by a group of 44 like-minded countries, which Australia is of course a part. And as co-chair this year, we'll be leading the negotiations, which will start in October. And also, and more importantly, the outreach to secure votes in favour of it. The resolution remains contentious and there are approximately 20 vocal opponents of the resolution. But there has been some relatively positive changes and we're seeing some recent changes in position, so we're hoping that we'll be able to garner some more support for it this year. Our objective really is simple, to increase or at the very least maintain support for the resolution in order really to strengthen the global norm against the death penalty. Including, I mean, as I was mentioning, countries have made moves to abolish or impose a moratorium on the death penalty in the last 2 years, which is promising. as I mentioned, the negotiations will commence in October, and the resolution will be actioned in UNGA's third committee in November, and then in the plenary in December. So I'd really, I guess, encourage the civil society representatives here to push for this, and I noted one of the recommendations that are being put forward. But we really need all the support we can get, and it can make a difference. I think if civil society makes its voices heard. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Just to say, I wanted to be quite short, to say a few words, to really give the word over to those who have unfortunately experienced some of these the issues that we're discussing today. But thanks very much to everyone for this opportunity and for being here today, and for all the work that's been done to address this issue. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Burrow, and thank you for your brave work on behalf of Australia. We're looking forward to getting more support from all the member states that we need. I know the Dutch are very much in favor of this changing of the resolutions. So the next speaker is Mrs. Golala Ismail. Let me see. Oh, it's on the screen. We'll have her story about Pakistan. Mrs. Ismail is a Pashtun human rights activist and is founder and chairman of Aware Girls, a Pakistan-based NGO working towards elimination violence and discrimination against women and girls. And Mrs. Ismail is also a global ambassador of the Humanist International. So let's listen to her.
Hi, thank you, Minister K, for providing me an opportunity to speak at this forum today. I will be speaking about the need of ending criminalization of blasphemy and apostasy all over the world. The criminalization and blasphemy and apostasy is a threat to both humanist and human rights defenders in Pakistan. The blasphemy laws are used against religious minorities and non-religious, especially those who engage in critical debate on religion and promote humanist values. Ayaz Nizami, a humanist blogger who was arrested in 2017, remains on death row in Pakistan. In 2017, Mashal Khan, a young graduate student who identified as humanist, was brutally murdered in a mob violence by his university fellows after being accused of blasphemy. Later that year, an online campaign started against me, accusing me of blasphemy because of my work on women's rights. The accusation of westernizing the society through my human rights work was enough to run online hate campaign against me, putting my life at risk. Within few hours of the campaign, I started receiving rape threats, death threats, and acid attack threats. I was able to stand my grounds and fight back using legal means. However, soon the state authorities started persecuting me directly using other laws such as sedition, anti-terrorism laws. In 2019, I was placed on a state kill list and I had to leave country in difficult circumstances. Now my parents are getting legally persecuted for my humanism and human rights work. My father had been arrested multiple times. My parents are on a trial in malicious case and have been placed on exit control list so that they are unable to leave country and reunite with their children. Pakistan has prosecuted more than 1,000 of people for blasphemy since introducing its current anti-blasphemy laws in 1988. Dozens of those found guilty remain on death row. The blasphemy laws remain one of the biggest threats to freedom of belief, the rights of religious minorities and humanists, political dissidents, and women's rights movement. Blasphemy laws are frequently used to settle personal vendettas, target scholars, academic scholars, and human rights defenders. One such case is of Junaid Hafiz, an academic scholar who has been in prison since 2019 and in a wild and gross miscarriage of justice was sentenced to death. Despite criminalization of blasphemy and apostasy and an enabling environment for vigilante justice against those accused of blasphemy, free thinkers still manage to come together in the form of organizations, bloggers, and express their ideas even when it comes at a high cost. For example, in Iran, women's movement against mandatory hijab. In Pakistan, Ayaz Nizami and Junaid Hafiz, while Raif Badawi in Saudi Arabia are examples of humanist resistance despite repression. But while humanists continue to organize and resist in the most of countries, a comprehensive protection and support system is lacking. We need to build international solidarity with those who are risking their lives for humanist values and those who are persecuted for being religious minorities, those who stand for the freedom of belief. Such solidarity would require not only to build mechanisms to lobby with the state authorities, but also require to extend legal and financial support to the families persecuted for blasphemy. Usually, after the accusation of blasphemy, the first and immediate need for the families is to relocate to safe places. I recommend to establish an emergency fund for the legal assistance and safe relocation of families of humanist and religious minorities when their lives are at risk due to the charges of blasphemy. There is an immediate and urgent need for building a truly international movement against for ending the criminalization of blasphemy and apostasy, and for the promotion of freedom of thought and expression. And we need we need a kind of movement which is based on partnership among the countries of both global north and global south. Thank you.
So there was a story about Pakistan and even the broader region. We continue quickly to Rose Richter. I know her from the video screens because of the Zooms that we did together with Dr. Ahmed Shaheed, the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion and Belief. She's been active in this field for 20 years. Thank you, Ambassador, again. And bless you. And she's been working with Dr. Shaheed for many years, fighting freedom of religion, the right to freedom of religion. So I give her the floor.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is on. No. Okay. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you for allowing me to join you this afternoon. Dr. Shaheed has been struck with COVID and is bedridden and unfortunately won't be able to attend any of the events that he had hoped to engage in this week. But I am here to send a message from him about his work on this issue over the course of the 6 years that he's been Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief. Now, I wanted to just stop a second and talk about the fact that approximately 58% of all communications that have been issued by 4 special rapporteurs on freedom of religion or belief since 2004 address the rights to freedom of expression, conscience, religion, or belief. These interventions raise concern about countless of reports received by their offices detailing surveillance, intimidation, harassment, prosecution, threats to bodily harm, torture, and murder following acts that had exceeded the limits imposed by law or by social convention on peaceful manifestations of thoughts, conscience, and religion or belief, or acts that had offended the sensitivities of others by denigrating what they held to be sacred. The Special Rapporteur, Ahmed Shaheed, noted in 2018 that the current age that we live in is one of unprecedented opportunity for human expression and interaction driven by an unparalleled human mobility and developments in information and communication technologies. At the same time, there has been a resurgence of old constraints along with the emergence of new legal and extra-legal limitations on freedom of expression wielded by state and non-state actors. Those include a revival of anti-conversion, anti-apostasy, and blasphemy laws, and an increasing reliance on public order or so-called social harmony laws to restrict the freedom to express views deemed offensive to religious or belief communities. Now, anti-conversion laws exist in about 16.4% of all states in the world that prohibit all proselytizing regardless of who is engaged in that activity. And 45.2% of all states that prohibit proselytizing by foreign clergy. In 2015, conversion efforts gave rise to incidents of social hostility falling short of physical violence in 25 countries. Some opponents of the unfettered right to proselytize argue that limits are necessary to preserve social order. They note that where competition between religious groups is hostile, where there is a history of religious violence, or where attempts to give religion a public role in life run counter to the state's views on that role, restrictions on proselytizing by antagonistic groups maintains harmony in society and prevents further conflict. Others maintain that proselytizing can and should be restricted if it is aimed at vulnerable populations or employs coercive or deceptive methods by attempting to trick, threaten, or force individuals to change their religion. But such laws often violate the forum internum and forum externum aspects of freedom of religion or belief. Now, at least 20 countries in the world penalize apostasy. And in these jurisdictions, laws are used to enforce religious dogma, such laws are often justified on the grounds of religious doctrine. Many of you also know that something like 40% of UN member states have anti-blasphemy laws on the books. This is 90% of all Middle Eastern and North African countries. If you count them as 20, it's 18 of them. 38% of sub-Saharan African countries, 34% of Asian Pacific countries, 34% of countries in the Americas, and 31% of countries in Europe. This is according to Pew. Now, those who support criminalizing blasphemy argue that criticism of religion or defamation of religious figures is a variant of hate speech. These proponents hold the view that there are insufficient prohibitions on speech that negatively stereotypes particular religions, and that this poses a threat to social harmony and the rights of individual adherents of those religions. They assert that these convictions held in earnest, such as those inspired by religious belief, constitute a foundation of human identity, analogous to race, ethnicity, or other immutable characteristics. Such attacks on a defining characteristic such as religion or belief, they say, are grounds for prohibition in the same way that hate speech laws are applied to protect vulnerable persons or groups who are targeted on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation. In reality, however, anti-blasphemy laws are generally focused on the degree to which speech causes offense or outrage to religious sentiments, and not to the extent to which that speech undermines the safety or quality of the individuals holding such views. In recent years, states have also adopted measures aimed at promoting or strengthening public order. By and large, their application served to protect majority religious sentiments or state-imposed religious or belief orthodoxies. Often referred to as public order laws, these measures either prohibit attacks on religious belief that could be deemed blasphemous or limit expression of views relating to religion or belief that conflict with those of the majority. Shorn of direct links to acts of violence, the tendency to characterize certain manifestations of religion or belief as extremist or a threat to public order includes the activities of missionaries or others who seek to convert others to their faith. Some assert that the expression of certain views within a society may create discontent, subvert national unity, or undermine public order and public safety. In some jurisdictions, anti-terrorism legislation targets newer communities and is being used to generate cases of alleged blasphemy offenses in counterterrorism courts. The Special Rapporteur has noted that in recent years, anti-blasphemy laws have been falling out of favor, with some governments moving to reform or fully repeal them. Instead, more and more states are apparently trending towards enacting laws on hate speech, as I said earlier. Now, these laws are often formulated in vague terms or focus on banning specific content, such as laws that and mimic laws that prohibit blasphemy. Now, laws formulated in this way are often applied to reinforce the dominant political, social, or moral narrative and opinions of a given society. They frequently target opposition voices and dissent and censor minorities. Thus, states use hate speech laws against the very minorities those laws are designed to protect. In some cases, hate speech laws are even used to restrict minorities from promoting their culture, their identity, or from expressing concern about discrimination against them as minorities. The Special Rapporteur notes that when governments restrict freedom of expression on these aforementioned grounds, peaceful expression or political and religious views is subject to potential prohibition. In practice, these laws can be used for the suppression of any dissenting view in violation of international human rights standards protecting freedom of opinion and expression, and of course, the right to religion or belief. In response, the international community must continue to support initiatives such as those led by the Australian government, the Joint Initiative, and to work in a collaborative fashion with both UN mechanisms, agencies, and UN member states to document and report on the implications and impact of these laws and continue to advocate for their repeal across the globe if we're ever to really realize this right to freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Rose. Your work and Dr. Shaheed's work to bring this out in the open, all the figures and all the current affairs on FORB. We quickly go on to John Ghanim. He has been a citizen of Yemen, and he would like to tell his story, what had happened to him during his student time. So John, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me here, and I would like to thank Jubilee Campaign and Free My People, and thank you so much, Lord Alton, and Allah. God bless you, and we give glory to the Lord. I am John Ghanim from Yemen. I was born in Yemen, and I am an ex-Muslim follower of Jesus Christ because I found the meaning of life through Jesus Christ. And you know, in article, as he mentioned, in Article 18, everyone has the right to freedom of thoughts, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion. This is what I did. I changed my religion. I follow Christ because I found the meaning of life. And I share my faith. I have my own ministry on social media. I am public Christian. I love to tell people about Jesus Christ. Why I cannot go back to Yemen? Because Yemen is a tribe country. Yemen is, tribes in Yemen is fierce, and they have the authorities. And in Yemen, the authorities, they have, the tribes, they have the Islam is their identity. And when I became Christian, when I declared my faith, my family disowned me. And my family-in-law divorced my wife, and they took away my daughters because I became Christian. And I receive death threats weekly. Even I live in the UK, and they still persecute me. I receive a warning from Yemeni community. They want to take me down because they want to silence me. They don't want me to speak freedom. They want to exercise my religion. Why? So, but you know, I have Jesus Christ, and this is why today, this is why we're here. We will share, and we will continue, and we will not give up. And I do believe that we are exist, and everyone as exists should exercise his freedom. And finally, I want to say we are in serious danger. And we appeal to you, we appeal to all of you to stand with persecuted Christians in Middle East, in Yemen, in these persecuted countries. So stand with them. We need to stand with them because they can't speak for themselves. Like in Yemen, you are not allowed to become a Christian. Why? You are not. There is underground Christians in Yemen, but they are under fear. They are in secret, so they cannot worship in freedom. Their dreams is to worship in freedom way. So we need to stay with them. We need to stand with them, and we need to support them. One voice, in one heart, and one spirit. And I see in this country, in Europe, like freedom is essential. But in our country, it's not. You born as a Muslim, you will die as a Muslim. If you leave Islam, you are apostate, and they will kill you. Because even Yemeni law is based on Islam. So today we appeal to all of you to stand with persecuted Christians because they are human beings, and they have their dignity to live as a human being and to exercise their freedom. So thank you so much.
Thank you, John, for speaking up and telling us about the situation in your country, in Yemen. Last speaker is Mr. Salomon. He's not going to be on this table because he doesn't want to be in the pictures. But he's going to tell us his story about his study on Sharia law and about what happened to him and why he had to flee his country. So, Mr. Salomon, the word to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In fact, I'm not going to tell my story. It is what is happening right now. I'm grateful to Lord Dalton, to John, and to our learned colleague here. Right. The violation of Article 18 is a violation of every article of the 30 articles of the Human Rights Declaration. And just by way of example, Ahmed married Nadia in 2016. 2018, he converted to the Christian faith. He discarded Islam. As a result, he was arrested. The family of Nadia took away Nadia from him and his children from him. And as a result, he was brought now before the court, before a Sharia court. Before the Sharia court now ruled over him and said that he had committed apostasy. He said, I have never insulted Islam. I have no intention of insulting Islam. All I did is I embraced Christian faith. When Nadia went back to her parents, and soon after that, she had been in contact with her ex-husband. She was convinced of the Christian faith, and she too embraced the Christian faith. Now, as a result, they are both forbidden to travel. Their identity cards have been withdrawn. Their birth certificate has been nullified, and they are in serious trouble. Ahmed, the husband, has tried his best, but he is under the jurisdiction of the Sharia court. He is not allowed to practice his freedom. He has lost his job, and the story continues. He is liable to be facing a death sentence, though the government says that the apostasy laws have been banished and dissolved. So what John shared is a true example, and of Nadia. This couple are struggling at the moment. They need to leave the country. They can't because they have no documentation. And every country in the world where there is blasphemy law, particularly Islamic countries, we face the serious trouble of the violation of human rights and freedom. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Salomon, of sharing this story. It's an urgent story to know what people go through if they change from religion. So this is the heart of the campaign that Jubilee is doing as well. Try to work and change the laws of different countries, especially with this resolution of the UN. We want to change a little bit, or add a little bit, the resolution on the death penalty in the fall with the General Assembly. So we need all the help we can get from you guys. If you go back to your country, please plea for support of changing the criminalization of apostasy and blasphemy, and put out the death penalty at least for these apostasies and blasphemy cases. So that's the plea I leave you with. I thank the panel for sharing your stories, your involvement, and your brave stand-up for religion of freedom, especially Lord Alton. Thank you. We know you have a busy schedule, and keep up the good work, and we see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.